When it comes to Marvel vs. DC, it's hard to argue that DC is winning this battle. We all know that the MCU is dominating in that field, and with video games, the only real contender from DC is the Arkham franchise. With Marvel, we got classics such as X-Men Origins Wolverine, Hulk Ultimate Destruction, Spider-Man 2, Marvel Nemesis, and we also got some not so popular games back in the day, such as Punisher, the Iron Man games, the Thor video game Ghost Rider, and recently we of course had amazing Marvel video games like Insomniac's Spider-Man, the Miles Morales one. We got Wolverine coming out in a couple of years from Insomniac, and of course a really good one to talk about, Avengers. Just kidding. I want to talk about Square Enix's Guardians of the Galaxy. When I first heard of this game, like others, I feared that it was going to be an Avengers ripoff, crappy story and gameplay, microtransactions, ugly character models, bland environments, and then we find out from, trailers that the game will only allow you to control Star-Lord in a team of 5. But a friend of mine recommended this game to me. He told me how great it was, it's underrated, and when I was about to purchase the game, I saw the news back a few months ago, however long ago it was, that the game was coming to Game Pass, and so I waited. I am very upset that I waited as long as I did. Guardians of the Galaxy is a criminally underrated game, and more people need to play this amazing superhero experience. Now, there are of course a few game mechanics that I don't necessarily agree with, but the positives more than outweigh the negatives. The game can be pretty repetitive, but what game isn't? You have quite a few combat sections which are pretty predictable when they're going to happen, and you often find yourself sliding down long slide areas from each level so you can progress from one part of the level to the next. These moments tend to happen more and more frequently as you get towards the end of the game. But aside from that, there's a lot more to this game than just that. For the most part, enemies are in some aspects repeated, but in other aspects there is a wide variety of enemies that you will face throughout this game. The levels are pretty linear for the most part, but there is some exploration in these levels which will allow you to find resources to upgrade Star-Lord and alternate costumes for each of the Guardians. The levels in this game are very diverse and expansive. As I mentioned before, you have levels in space, levels on planets, you have like a snow level, a forest level type of thing, very different scenery for these levels. And the game is not necessarily short, but it's not necessarily long either. And with these levels, you do tend to have a mix of action as well as some walking sections with story elements. You have some exploration elements. And one of the things that this game does really well is the dialogue between the characters. The dialogue is very entertaining, and you get to see the Guardians either agree with something or they have a disagreement and they argue.
Lady Hellbender is a renowned warrior, an ideal specimen to reflect that strength.
Like I said, something scary.
Strength is endearing.
With a name like Hellbender, Gamora's probably right. It's gotta be something scary.
Nightmarish.
You do have choices that you can make in this game throughout various conversations. Now, some of these choices don't really matter, it's just to get your point of view on the situation, but there are other choices that will have major effects for how the story progresses. Early on in the game, I managed to piss off Rocket, which led him wanting to take Groot and leave the Guardians behind and start a new adventure for themselves. Some of these other choices can have even major effects for the story. I won't talk about those things because they are pretty spoiler heavy. But with the character dialogue here, you also learn more about the characters, their backstories. You see the progression through the game of like their relationships. You see how much each character grows as a character based on your decisions and your choices. You also see that the characters tend to learn how to trust one another and be there for one another, and that's pretty cool. in terms of performance, the game did perform almost perfectly. I played the majority of this game on the Series S, and then I finished it on the Series X. Now, I did experience a few bugs where maybe I was stuck somewhere, or I couldn't go through a certain area, but all it would take was a quick load, last checkpoint save, and you're good to go. Nothing game crashing, not having to reset my console or anything like that. Now, another thing that this game does really well is the sound. Not just from the gameplay, the sound effects of the weapons and the battling, but even the music. Number one, they have a lot of licensed tracks in this game from legendary artists from like the 70s and the 80s. People, legends like Motley Crue and Rick Astley, Flock of Seagulls, and they even developed their own soundtrack for it's like a Star-Lord rock band that is in the game, and they made a full 80s theme rock soundtrack for this game that you can find on Apple Music and probably Spotify and other music medias. As I said before, sound for gameplay is pretty great. Your blasters, Gamora's sword, the way the characters are in battle, that is pretty great for the most part. One issue I had with sound was throughout certain dialogue moments, there was some dialogue being cut out depending on if I moved a couple of feet somewhere or if I turned the camera a certain direction. I don't know if it has anything to do with 3D audio, because it happened both with headphones and without headphones, and as far as I can see, there is no option to enable or disable 3D audio. But aside from that, let's talk about what makes the gameplay great. Now, as I said, you do only have control over Star-Lord, but you can also give the Guardians a couple of commands in and out of battle. Now, when you're in battle, you can combine some of these commands, more like these special moves, and if you are creative enough, you can get some pretty cool effects here. One of my favorite combos is using Groot to tie up a few enemies with his branches, and then using Rocket to launch a bomb on those captured enemies to deal more damage to them and potentially defeat them. I had another combo where I had Drax grab an enemy and would wrestle him around while I'm blasting endlessly at the enemy. When it comes to these attacks, each character has about 3 special attacks you can unlock through ability points, and then they have one main special that they unlock throughout story progression. Some better than others, in my opinion. When it comes to Star-Lord, he does have a bit more of unlocking items because he is your character, but this is more so of extra health, extra shield, maybe a couple of different maneuvers for you as well. So combat for the most part is pretty simple, but can be creative if you know what you're doing, and there's a lot of fun to have here with the combat. One of my favorite Star-Lord moves that you can unlock is having him hover with his jet boots around the map and you're blasting enemies from up above, and there's also his incredibly cool rapid fire attack. As for the design of Star-Lord's helmet, you can use the helmet in and out of battle, similar to Batman's detective mode. And the helmet does change design depending on which alternate costume you use. I only wish that you were able to use the helmet outside of battle whenever you want, to view it, have him wear the helmet without using the special mode, but it's only on his face during battle and certain areas in the game. I did have one bug where the helmet was on outside of battle, and it was a really badass helmet from a badass costume, but I ended up dying and it fixed the bug from there. Now, outside of combat, as I mentioned, you can use different abilities from the Guardians to help you progress the levels. Drax can move heavy objects, Rocket can hack various gadgets and computers, Groot will make a bridge for you to cross over, Gamora will help you reach higher grounds, and this is needed for some very simple puzzle solving. There's not too many puzzles in here, maybe something that will be added to another game, but in terms of puzzle solving, so to speak, it's just the way to get to the next area. Now, in terms of explaining the story without giving away too much, the team is just trying to save the galaxy from an evil space cult, and that's the simplest I can make it without spoiling anything. And trust me, this is not one story that you want to be spoiled on. You want to experience it for yourself and see all the twists and turns and all the crazy situations that can happen. And this game does have a heavy amount of world building for the Guardians of the Galaxy. You don't really get this world building from the movies. You learn about different characters and different locations, characters' past histories, some of their personal personalities, some secrets of theirs. There is a lot of story to be said here, and there's various sections where when you're on the ship, you can talk to one of your characters about something that happened with them in the mission, or you found an artifact that's related to that character and you get more backstory on that. So that is pretty cool. The game does also have a lot of Easter eggs and some cameos, both within the Guardians of the Galaxy comics as well as Marvel as a whole. I'll give you one chapter in mind. There's a chapter where you can explore the Collector's Museum, and there's quite a few Easter eggs you can find here. The only one I will tell you about is the Superhero Registration Act. Basically, the as far as I know, it's basically the Sokovia Accords from the Civil War movie. So something like that. Other Easter eggs I won't spoil for you here. Other cameos that I won't spoil for you here. Some of these cameos are just small cameos, and some of them are much major cameos. Now, this game could take you around 25 to 30 hours or so, maybe 20 if you're going to rush through it quickly. You do get a New Game Plus mode when you complete it, so you can go back and find any of the costumes you missed. I don't know if there's anything extra for like a new difficulty mode or any new unlockables. There probably isn't. But I want to see how much further we can take this franchise, because it clearly did much better than the Avengers game. Like, maybe we could see a DLC where you play as one of the other Guardian members and do something focused on them. Gamora specifically, because of something that happened that I won't spoil here, but I want to know more about this and experience it for myself. But to end this video out, I have to say, honestly, 100% honestly, if you have Game Pass and you haven't played this game yet, you need to go play it. And if you don't have Xbox and you have PlayStation, you should buy this game. I know it is discounted physically in stores as compared to paying 70 or 60 to 70 on the PlayStation store. But if you can go get it in store, it's worth the money. I think it's around 30 or 40 bucks physically if you have PlayStation. It's well worth the money. There's so much more to be said about this game, but I don't want to make a hour-long video about this. It's best to experience this game for yourself. If you recap everything, you have great controls for the most part. The controls are not complicated, they're very simple. There's creativity in the combat. There's a variety of things to do in terms of your combat sections, your exploration sections, your story building sections, the dialogue and the characters and the communication between the characters. Everything about it was great. The story was great. The photo mode is pretty cool. I haven't experienced the photo mode fully in depth like I did with the Spider-Man game, so I don't think there's as many elements in the photo mode, but it is a pretty cool photo mode either way. And I can't really say anything else going forward from there. Like, it's a really great game. If you are going to Twitch stream it at some point, there is an option to use generic music that they offer. I haven't heard those songs, but the licensed tracks, if you're not going to stream, also makes it worth the purchase of experiencing this game. Like I said, there's a lot more to say about it, so I won't go into too much detail, but this is my recommendation. Major 2 thumbs up. Go out and get this game if you haven't gotten it already. I'm Anthony Online Tech. I really hope you enjoyed this video, as I am preparing to put more and more content out there, and I will see you guys next time.
Whatever you can fly away from.
Means you screwed up because you had to fly away from it.
Please don't be Nova. Please don't be Nova Corps. Please don't be Nova Corps.
It is Nova Corps.